What's happening, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty podcast. And on this week's show, we're going to go in reverse order. Normally, we do Mock Draft Monday for a Tuesday podcast. This week, we're going to go with the regular Dynasty WarZone on Tuesday, and the mock draft will be on Wednesday. We have Kane Fassell and Shane P. Hallam of the Devi Marketplace stopping by, as well as a buddy of mine named Dallas Hyder, and the man of the hour, the man with the power. His name is Jerry Sinclair. Those guys are going to stop by. We're going to do some mock draft. We're going to mock draft running backs from the rookie classes of 2019, 2020, and 2021. We want to see how good this current class stacks up with the two most recent ones. And I'll tell you a guy who always stacks up with the best of them. He is my co-host tonight. He is the host of the Fantasy Football Smackdown, found on Twitter at the FF Smackdown. He is Kyle August, and he is our redraft bro. Kyle, welcome back, man.
Hey, Memphis, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to chatting with you a bit tonight.
Yeah, man, we're going to talk about our staff running back ranking. So we're going to do these things in pairs. Now, normally on a normal Monday night for a Tuesday podcast, we would be doing the rookie mock draft. And then tomorrow we would be doing the staff rankings of that position group. But this week we're going to do it in reverse order. So you're still going to get both. We're just going to do this tonight. So real quick, before we get into this with me and Kyle, I want to make sure to tell you that 5-star reviews are very important for the show. So if you'd be so kind, if you're listening on the podcast feed, just hit pause, go into the rating and review section, especially on Apple. Again, I have an Apple phone. I know Kyle has an Apple phone because when he texts me, I get the blue screen, so I know he's a fellow Apple guy. But even if you're on like Podbean or Stitcher, I know they have some kind of a review function on there. So, man, give us a 5-star. Let us know what's going on. We're keeping these intros shorter on all of the shows based off of a review. So if there's something you'd like us to see more of, cool. Let us know. If you want to see us do some less of something, let us know so that we can make it better for you, the consumer. And so there's nothing really, on the rear view mirror. We did some prop bets and some gambling last week. Had a great week, 3-1 on props. And what's on the horizon? Really, just the rookie mock draft tomorrow. So I don't have a whole lot to promote tonight. Trying to keep this short. What about you, Kyle? You have anything to promote over at the Smackdown?
Just doing a show, drop each week on Thursday right now, heading through the playoffs, and just doing some look back stuff this week on the show this upcoming Thursday. Have another great guest on, and we're going to be looking at some of the bust candidates or the bust players from 2020 and what their outlook is for 2021 and beyond. So whether you're talking just 2021 value or redraft value right now, should be buying or selling those guys. Going to be covering that, and just keeping it loose this time of year stuff and some fun and enjoying these playoffs so far. Looking forward to the conference championships this weekend.
Oh, man, I cannot wait. So I'm going to hit you with a curveball because, we've been hitting like one current NFL event per show. We're not going to jump into the coaching hires. They're not all complete. Last I knew, the Eagles were close with Josh McDaniels, formerly of the Broncos and currently with the Pats. And the Texans, they had an interview on Monday as we record this live on YouTube, an interview with Eric Bieniemy. So there's still going to be more to come. So we're going to do an entire coaching, review show once everybody's hired. They've named some OCs, because if not, we're just trying to piece this thing together. The question I have for you, we'll be doing the quarterback show here. We may do it next week. We may do tight ends next week. I may flip a coin. I really don't know. But we'll do something next week. But I wanted to hit you with the Deshaun Watson news. It just continues to be this slow, steady drumbeat for Deshaun Watson. And do you actually think he will leave Texas?
So, and I don't know if it's just because there's not enough going on right now. You thought with 4 huge games this last week, there'd be plenty of news in this cycle, right? But it was like nonstop all week was Deshaun Watson whining and complaining and wanting out and all this. And like most of you out there, I was like, I totally get it. This has been just a shit organization for, this entire year. It started off, with the Hopkins trade, and then they fired, Bill O'Brien, and now all these stories are coming out about this like cult leadership thing going on. Whatever, man. Even from afar, this thing looks crazy. So even in the building, you got to assume it's nuts. But then I looked, Memphis, and I took a look at the old Google machine, and I Googled DeAndre Hopkins trade. And what do you know? That said March 2020. Then I Googled Deshaun Watson contract extension, September 2020. I don't feel bad for this dude whatsoever. I'm sick and tired of hearing him complain about things. I get it. It's crap, but he should have known what he was getting himself into in September when he signed that 4-year deal. When he signed that 4-year deal, and the reason I bring it up is because it is highly unlikely I think this man is going anywhere unless the Houston Texans can find a dance partner that's willing to take on a huge contract, and Houston is willing to eat a ton of cap space up on a player that won't be on their team. So kind of like, I think you guys have been talking about on the WarZone, other podcasts on Twitter, talking about the unlikelihood of Carson Wentz being moved. I think that right here with Watson, it's pretty similar. I think it's going to be difficult for them to move him no matter how disgruntled he is. And sometimes these things work themselves out. So I'm tired of him whining, but two, so whether it's him or his camp, they got to figure it out. But number two, man, and answer your question, I don't necessarily see Watson making a move anywhere because it's going to be tough for the Texans to do anything about it.
Well, before I give you my 2 cents, let me give Deshaun Watson some advice from a fellow Texan.
There's no use in sitting here crying, whining, pissing, moaning.
Yeah, man, it is what it is. There's a certain quarterback playing on Sunday for the NFC Championship game. His name is Aaron Rodgers, and he's pissy 2 years ago when they hired Matt LaFleur without his real input. And then last year, according to Twitter, Twitter's like going to WebMD. If you look long enough, you'll eventually have like some kind of disease that's killing you. And the same thing with Twitter. You cannot make them happy. And the same thing with Deshaun Watson. He's not going anywhere. So Nick Caserio, the new GM of the Houston Texans, right? He's the new GM. And what do you want? Do you want to be the guy who traded Deshaun Watson? I forget. I know it was Portland. He was the guy who drafted the guy over Kevin Durant. He's from Indiana. Greg Oden. He was the guy.
Greg Oden, yeah.
So you have that scarlet letter on you the rest of your life. Nick Caserio, he was the dumbass who traded Deshaun Watson. Do you want that? I mean, it's not his fault. Yeah, the owner. First of all, if you tell someone you're going to do something, just do it. But that's plain and simple. So if they told Deshaun they were going to include him, they should have. But that Nick Caserio, he would just be better off bringing him in and saying, "Look, dude, I understand I'm not the guy you wanted or you would have liked to have, but we're in this together at this point. I'm never going to get fair value for you. I'm not going to be the guy who trades the best quarterback." And I would put him over strong. I'm not going to trade, in my opinion, what I think is the best quarterback in the NFL for anything. There's not a player. There's not a set of picks. I wouldn't take Josh Allen. I wouldn't take Patrick Mahomes. That's how I would frame that conversation. I certainly want your input as we, interview head coaches. We got to do this via Zoom. Here's the link. Would love to have you jump in. Would love to have you, ask some questions on the Zoom. But unfortunately, we can't trade you, and we're not going to trade you. We would never get fair value. And I would just approach it like that. And if Deshaun continues to balk, well, then he can get fined like however many thousands of dollars a day until he does report. I mean, he's signed, I think it was a $165 million deal. He's doing okay. They're not doing him wrong in Houston. Is it a bad organization? I think that Jack Easterby, the team chaplain or whatever, that dude needs to go. I will not disagree with that. But at the same time, listen, I love my Colts. I love the roster. I love 4 Pro Bowlers. I love Quentin Nelson. I love DeForest Buckner. But if I could give all of that up just to get a Deshaun Watson level quarterback, that's the thing. That's the thing. You can turn this thing around very quickly. Even with limited draft picks, I get it. It's probably going to be a shit show for the rest of, 2021. It is what it is. But, you got some contracts to clean up. You've got some salary cap space. Maybe you can move J.J. Watt. Maybe you can move Merciless or, some of these other players. But he's the thing. He's the thing you build around. You have the thing. You have the thing everybody wants. So Andrew Brandt, I saw you like this tweet today. Andrew Brandt of of Twitter fame. I know he was a member of the Packers front office for a long time. He does a class, I think it's at Villanova University in Philadelphia, as well as some radio spots. He is like, I don't want to be the anti-hot take guy, but Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson aren't going anywhere. And he's as patched in as anybody. You know, sources right now, I heard a great quote today. Agents this time of the year get switched out for league sources. I mean, they're attached to the league and they're a source. And they, you know,
Yeah.
like Doug Peterson going to the Philadelphia Eagles. What? Huh? You want to run the ball more, and Doug Peterson runs the ball like a third of the time.
Mhm.
That seems counterintuitive. So I don't get too caught up in this news cycle. We will really address it as it comes up. You're going to hear a lot about Deshaun Watson from me. Hashtag spoiler alert. He is my number 2 overall QB in a startup. And speaking of rankings, we're going to jump into some staff running back rankings here in just a second. I want to make sure to remind you that this first segment is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. It is where you can get access to all of these rankings. Do you want our rankings? Cool. Feel free to tune in every week, grab a pen and paper, and write down everything we say. Or simply subscribe over at patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone, and they're there. You also can get in the Dynasty group chat. You can get in the rookie group chat. You can get in the gambling group chat. There is so much, and as prices across the globe are going up on basically everything, for $5 a month, if you drink that fancy bullshit coffee that my wife drinks, if you could just have one of them $1 gimmicks at McDonald's, it's good coffee, by the way. $1 coffee at McDonald's is good ass coffee. So if you could forego the mocha latte syrup and stuff, we'll have more than enough money left over to come hang out over at patreon.com/Dynasty Warzone. And you'll get all these rankings and so much more. All right, Kyle, let's get into some rankings. I am going to just go backwards. I'm going to go backwards this time. And then you can tell me where this player fits in your rankings, and then we'll discuss them. You ready?
Sounds good.
Here we go, man. The first guy coming in at number 12 in our rankings, Austin Eckler. Now, where do you have Austin at personally, and do you agree with this ranking?
Yeah, I do have Eckler inside my top 12. It was a rough season for him in 2020, obviously due to injury. I was actually surprised, looked this up for another podcast a week or so ago, and that he actually played. He did play 10 games. It seemed like he missed more time, and his overall numbers weren't what you expected. You know, from as far as the counting stats go for missing games, but even his production was out there. He didn't find Pater enough. So I actually have Eckler in my dynasty running back rankings at running back 10. The dude still catches a ton of passes, even with Herbert under center this year. He was getting a lot of targets, which is great, and that's why you love him for fantasy football. He only had 3 total touchdowns this year, so that's going to kill anybody's fantasy value. But I get the only question I have with Eckler is just, what does this offense look like going forward? They just hired their new head coach, who's the defensive coordinator from the Rams. So obviously, an offensive coordinator change is probably coming. Who is that going to be as we see how all the chips fall? And then what is Eckler's role in this offense? Is it that you can pencil him in for 65 plus catches, but only 150 attempts, 130 attempps? I don't know. So that's why I don't have him much higher. He is a little bit older than some of these other backs that are in these rankings, but I think when you're talking about a PPR guy and not having all the wear and tear, you can give him maybe a year or two extra that you may not give like a Derrick Henry or a Zeke Elliott type. So I think Eckler coming in here at 12 in our consensus rankings is right about where he should be, and somebody that I still think carries a lot of value heading into 2021.
Well, we are in pretty close proximity to each other. You had him at 10. I have him at 11. So we're right there. We're slightly above the group's consensus. And actually, the new head coach, Robert Staley, is supposed to be keeping current offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. Part of the condition of him getting the job, and I heard this today on the GM Shuffle podcast with Mike Lombardi and Adnan Virk, that the owner, Spanos, is notoriously cheap. And he wanted to keep and in this case, it does kind of make sense in that Herbert really likes this offensive group. So you have, kind of like the opposite of what they did with Deshaun Watson in Houston. Oh, hey, the quarterback actually likes these guys. Hey, let's keep them. And everyone that I've that I have a lot of respect for. They don't necessarily do fantasy. Like Peter Schrager was one, Albert Breer was another. A lot of those guys that are really in the know in NFL circles, they really seem to champion this hire. So from a coaching change and offensive schematic change, that's not really in the cards for me. I'm still very bullish on Austin Eckler, and he plays a kind of game that ages well. So he's a borderline RB1 for both me, you, and the group, but still an RB1 for us, all of the same. So let's go into running back number 11, a very young man here. And I'm very impressed with our group for getting him in this high, Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson. Now I see you laughing. Are you an Antonio Gibson guy?
I'm apparently one of the bad apples that had no part in getting him inside our top 12, because I did not rank Antonio Gibson inside my top 12. He would have just missed it. An impressive rookie year, and unfortunately, self-admittedly, I wasn't on the Gibson train at the end of the season, so I had no shares, even at a very discounted rate, completely reasonable, and oftentimes was sitting there in a place where he should have probably been taken by me. But I went with, one of those, I'd have to go back but I just remember the names like Chenault or Brian Edwards, like those kind of mid-second guys, and that, didn't necessarily live up, when I know Gibson was probably on the board in some cases, depending on what time we did that rookie draft. So I know his price tag last summer was perfect, and that kind of adds to just the lore of him. But I think he definitely showed it on the field as well. Like a fantastic rookie season, coming into the league, not necessarily playing the running back position a whole lot in college, and he really did impress. So he made a believer out of me. I just have some guys that I like a little bit more, so that I gave an edge over. As far as even in this rookie class, I mean, it was so strong. Gibson is probably right there around fifth, even amongst the rookies for me. Like, I do think some of these other guys have just a little bit more upside than Gibson, and I'm really questioning like what that offense is going to look like going forward, which is kind of probably why I knocked him just outside my top 12. So like the kid a lot, but he just didn't make my top 12.
Well, I have him a little bit higher. I think I have him right on par with the group. I have him at 10, so I have him a little bit one spot ahead of 11th overall. And what I like about him is one of our Patreons reached out to me in the group chat. He was like, "What's your level of concern about Antonio Gibson with a new GM potentially coming into Washington?" And I'm like 0.0, because he was drafted by Ron Rivera and Scott Turner. Scott Turner, I've said this before, he is the OC that made Christian McCaffrey the overall RB1 in all of fantasy. He was already a RB1, meaning a top 12 option at the position, but it was the play calling and the play designing of Scott Turner that made him the bell cow. And Antonio Gibson looked pretty damn good for a guy with 37 college carries or whatever it was coming into the league. And I don't need to remind you any more than watching that Cowboys game from Thanksgiving to remind you of just how good this guy can be. I think this team will get an upgrade at the most important position. And if they were to add a Trey Lance, I don't think Zach Wilson, but if they were to add a Trey Lance, even a Jameis Winston, who's a free agent, Jameis will make me a little bit nervous because he doesn't check the ball down quite as much to the running back position. But I think the sky's the limit for this kid. I think they'll shake some of the dead weight there, like a J.D. McKissick or AP's in Detroit now.
Peyton Barber.
They'll put some of these Peyton Barber's the crusty veteran in the way, but no, I firmly believe Antonio Gibson's going to be an RB1 for at least the next couple of seasons, and you're only going to see more of him in the pass game in Washington. So I'm a big fan. Let's go to number 10. Now, this guy's probably a little bit low by our rankings versus, say, consensus, but that's okay. I'd rather be a year early on moving a guy than a year too late. And I am getting some not so warm and fuzzies that he'll be back in Green Bay, and that's Aaron Jones. As we talk today, Green Bay is, slightly above the projected salary cap. I think it was like $15 million over, which isn't horrible. You cut a couple of veterans and, nip tuck here or there. And they're good. But Aaron Jones is going to want Alvin Kamara money. He's going to want Dalvin Cook money. He's going to want Joe Mixon money. The money that his peers in the 2017 running back class just signed for. And Green Bay clearly is not going to have that kind of cap space available. They kind of already brought in a pseudo replacement. He runs differently, but he is a running back in A.J. Dillon. Hashtag go by A.J. Dillon. And I think they can re-sign Jamal Williams to be the pass-catching number 2 there a lot cheaper. Now, I would love Aaron Jones if he were to land in a spot like Miami, a spot like the Jets, 2 teams needing some running back upgrades. Frank Gore can't make it forever, no matter what your former co-host Seth will tell us. He is not infinite. At some point, the world will catch up with him. But I do believe Aaron Jones is a buy. And if you can get Aaron Jones in a deal where you get Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and you sell the owner that he's the handcuff, you could walk away with 2 potential starters in a deal and say, hey, all right, give me Aaron Jones. And you have his handcuff, A.J. Dillon. I want him too. And you could walk away with 2 starters. So he is he is not someone that I was super, super high on. He did not make my top 12. I'm very youth biased in this group. Where do you have Aaron Jones?
Yeah, he was outside my top 12 as well. I'm on the same page with you. And you laid it out perfect as far as what his offseason could look like. I agree with you. I think Williams is the more likely option to return to Green Bay. Jones is obviously the better talent out of the 2, but we've seen Green Bay lean on Williams when needed. He's somebody they featured as the passing downs back, and we've saw glimpses of A.J. Dillon this year. So I think everything you mentioned is spot on. And for me in this exercise right now, there's no reason to rank Aaron Jones this high when there are so many question marks around him, and there are many fewer question marks around some of these other guys. Like I did a podcast just a couple weeks ago, similar to what we did last week with the wide receiver position. We did a draft with the last 2 rookie classes. So we did 2019, 2020, and we left all position players. And, A.J. Dillon was somebody that even right now in January, I was like, this is the ultimate scratch off lottery ticket, right? This isn't just like the dollar one. This is this is like a $20 scratch off. It's going to cost you a little bit, but it could be a much bigger prize in A.J. Dillon because he could be the starting running back for the Green Bay Packers in a matter of months. It could all go up in smoke if things don't work out necessarily the way that you and I are projecting with Green Bay moving on from Aaron Jones, but I just don't think there's enough here for me to have him inside the top 10. So we'll see where he lands. Lots still to figure out there, but there's just, again, a lot of younger running backs with secure homes that I like better.
And I may have to look at this because I was reading some rankings and he had moved. You recently did a very nice job cleaning up our spreadsheet. So he is a fringe RB1 pretty much across the board. He was in a couple of guys' top 12, just barely enough to make this top 12 status. Here's your boy, straight out of Dallas, Ezekiel Elliott, coming in. No, excuse me, I'm one too early. It's DeAndre Swift at number 9. Maddie Big Chest, our graphics guru and member of the Dynasty Rewind Devi team. His ranking of like number 2 overall or whatever insanely high he has DeAndre Swift was not enough to get him in the top half, but I'm a fan. Where are you at with Swift?
Yeah, I like Swift a lot, and I will definitely give you guys the credit on a lot of that with even in preseason before we saw what Swift could do after that first month of the season. Like you guys were saying, landing spot and some of the narrative from last summer definitely threw dynasty owners off the trail, right? And Swift was an obvious talent that landed in a spot that wasn't sexy just because it's the Detroit Lions, right? But he had been the consensus RB1 for multiple years for that draft class before the NFL draft. So he was somebody who could pick up in that mid-first that most years probably would have been a top, 2-3 pick. And I have him ranked I do have him ranked inside my top 12 at running back 8. Some moving parts with that Detroit offense and the coaching staff and what it will look like. But there's no doubt that when they started featuring DeAndre Swift after their early bye week 5 on, the dude was averaging 17 fantasy points in PPR. And while there were still some points left on the table because we saw Adrian Peterson sniping some touchdowns and Swift missing a few games here and there, when you looked at it as a whole, when he was truly available, they did feature this guy enough, or even if they get that same split going forward, he's going to be an extremely valuable running back with a ton of upside. So I like I like Swift a lot. He's somebody right now that, as far as, even if you're talking about this rookie class, I have him almost neck and neck with another running back we're going to talk about here later. But I have him ahead of some of his rookie companions like J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers, who just put on fine finishes to the season here. So I like Swift a lot, and he's top 10 running back easily for me.
Well, I don't believe in secondhand genius, if you've ever heard that term. Like, just because you work next to Bill Belichick does not make you Bill Belichick. And just because the Lions' new head coach, Dan Campbell, worked next to Sean Payton for the last few years does not make him Sean Payton. But I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt for now. And I would like to think that he has seen how Sean Payton has used Alvin Kamara over the last handful of years. And he's got to walk in there day one and scratch the top of his head and go, you know, that DeAndre Swift guy, he looks a lot like Alvin Kamara. And, you know, I could do a lot with Swift, what Sean did with, you know, Kamara in New Orleans. So I actually see this as a little bit of a bump. Like I said, we'll get into all the coaching narrative and everything in the offseason. I have him at 5. I like to be young at the running back position. You're going to hear me personally kill some of the older guys, not like physically, like literally kill them. I would be in jail. You know, that's still against the law in this country. But you're going to hear me be less than a fan of some of these older guys. All right, I already mentioned his name once. It is your boy. It is Ezekiel Elliott coming in at let's see here, number 8. Number 8, is that right?
Yeah.
All right, number 8, your boy Zeke. I'm gonna let you have the floor first on Zeke because I have Zeke at 12. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, and he's definitely a guy that, if you're and rightfully so, a good strategy is, like you mentioned earlier, maybe be a year early than a year late, and especially at the running back position, because I think it's a little easier to predict when that fall off is going to come. And when you look at if you look at Zeke, the workload in 2017, 2018, 2019 was extremely high, over 300 attempts and a ton of work. I know the one year he missed some games, but on average, the dude was seeing just a ton of carries, and that's usually going to lead to a quick cliff for fantasy running back. I still have him at number 6. I think in general, and I know if Jerry was on this podcast too, he would have probably 27 minutes into this podcast would have mentioned about 15 times how much he just hates all running backs. And I definitely was leaning more towards that camp following the 2020 season. It was extremely frustrating position. And when you look back, and as I was doing some research for this show, just take a second, go to whatever your favorite website is, look for fantasy stats, and just toggle back a couple years and look at that top 12. It is extremely hard for these guys to have a long run, as we've seen in the past, like prior to, a dozen years or so ago, you kind of predicted it was going to be the same few guys for a while. But now it's a year or two at best, and then these guys fall off. I think Zeke still has some good years left in him, but maybe only 2, maybe 3 seasons. When you look at his contract, the dead cap cut is pretty manageable after 2023. With that coming back, I think, though, this offense is going to be clicking. So if I can get 2 years of Ezekiel Elliott, I still feel pretty good about that. He only had 240 attempts in the first year with Mike McCarthy, but 50-plus catches 3 years in a row, which is really good. I mean, he doesn't do everything with him that a Kamara and McCaffrey does, but that's a hell of a number when you compare him to some of the other backs that we're even talking about here. So I still think Zeke is a top 10 running back over the next few years, and that's enough for me to put him at number 6 overall right now and feel pretty comfortable with the production he's going to give me.
All right. Well, I still like Zeke. He kind of feels at this point in his career like a jazzed up version of Melvin Gordon. He's going to have some good games. He's on a better offense than Melvin Gordon. He's a better running back than Melvin Gordon. He's got a better contract than Melvin Gordon. But you said it, man. You go back as recently as 2016, and you look at the wide receivers kicking ass. And it was Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins, and who's still kicking ass? DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams, even though they're getting a little bit older at this point at the wide receiver position. And the NFL standing for not for long means the most at the running back position. So again, I'm always going to be looking to be a year early than a year late on moving these guys. So that's why he's clinging by the jaws of life to the top 10, or should be the top 12 for me. All right, number 7. I'm actually a little bit, I don't say puzzled, bamboozled by this guy still being this Nick Chubb. He was more involved in the pass catching here recently, but he comes in at number 7 on consensus with the group. For me personally, I have Nick Chubb number 7, so maybe I'm right in line with everybody. I will say this: over the last couple of weeks, I was betting his betting props on the over on receiving yards and receptions because they're like unfavorably low most of the time on DraftKings or FanDuel Sportsbook. So he's more and more involved. I would have him probably going into year 4. I would probably have him maybe a spot or 2 higher if the team hadn't just re-upped Kareem Hunt. He's going to continue to be involved, and even if he takes 35% of the workload, would Nick Chubb, instead of getting 65%, would he have 80% if Kareem Hunt was doing something somewhere else? So I still like him. Dude, you watch him run. It's a combination of smashing people and effortlessly, slicing through the line. It's a very unique running style that I enjoy watching. So I have him at 7. Who do you have? Where do you have Chubb? Well, look at that. You're right there.
Yeah, I have him at 7 as well. And I was thinking the same thing as you were talking. Like, man, like, yeah, he does seem a hair high. And like, if I really think about it, like, I probably do prefer DeAndre Swift, who I have lower. I know you have Swift above him. I believe you said you had Swift at 5. So like that's an adjustment I would probably make in my own rankings. But regardless, Chubb's still gonna be a top 10 running back in our consensus rankings. But I think there are some concerns. You mentioned the contract, follow the money, right? Which is a huge thing that you do a great job of pointing out. All Dynasty owners should be more than aware of what these players' contracts are. Nick Chubb is going to be entering this upcoming offseason that he's going to be going through the Kamara, Mixon, Cook, time. He was a 2nd-round pick, so he does not have a 5th-year option. The Browns are going to have to decide whether they're going to commit money to him or not, and does that affect Chubb's status in 2021 to start the year? The dude is an absolute talent, but the NFL is starting to get wise, as it should, and except the Dallas Cowboys, that you shouldn't be paying these guys, these huge contracts. Now, if they're reasonable enough to get out in a couple of years, like most of these guys this last year just got, and Chubb's, willing to get in line with that, I'd love to see him stay in Cleveland. I think he'd be a top 10 running back going forward without question. But there's those doubts, and like you mentioned, they've already committed, as far as years, to Kareem Hunt. So I like Nick Chubb. He doesn't carry the catch upside that's going to make him a top 5 running back probably. So he's still going to be a top 10 guy for me, but there's maybe a guy or two that if I was going through this again, I might put over. And if any of you out there have put together your own rankings before, oftentimes there are little slight adjustments you're going to make each time you look at it, and that's probably one of them for me.
Well, you should be making adjustments to that's why in the show title it's called the postseason pre-free agency running back rankings, because this is going to change after free agency. I mean, it's not likely to happen, but if Tennessee brings in Marlon Mack or brings in Aaron Jones, I'm going to have to adjust some rankings for a guy named Derrick Henry. It's just how it works. If Aaron Jones goes to Miami, I'm going to have to rethink my ranking. It's just how it is. So we update our rankings about, I'd say, once a month in the off season. In season, you can make decisions and you could be making minor adjustments throughout every week if you want. But for me in the off season, it's about once a month unless something dramatic happens. A guy gets cut, someone gets traded, a draft pick gets made. You got to make moves then. But right now, if you're getting accurate rankings up a month, the source you are getting them from is pretty good. Here's a guy that is ranked pretty high by some of the other members of the staff. I don't have him inside my top 12 at all. I've actually moved him out, and that's Derrick Henry. Comes in at number 6 for the staff, so I will just go ahead and say my piece. I don't want to be the lazy content provider that tells the listeners of the WarZone to trade Derrick Henry, but he's kind of like a used truck. He's like a used pickup truck. Some guys make a living with a pickup truck. Now, you only buy a used pickup truck with 160,000 miles that's been beat to shit if that's all you can afford. You'd prefer a newer truck that maybe doesn't have so many miles on it, and that's what Derrick Henry is. He's very useful. He does the job. But for me, for a running back with his mileage, to use an analogy, his mileage and his lack of a safe pass catching floor like an Alvin Kamara or a Christian McCaffrey gives me pause. Like I said about Nick Chubb, we saw him more involved in the passing game down the stretch. We saw his snap share go up just a little bit down the stretch. So I have a little bit more of a ray of sunshine at the end of that tunnel with Nick Chubb than I do with Derrick Henry. And I know, the kids like to use the term, he's built different. He is just built different. Derrick Henry is. He's built like a monster. But at some point, that 300, 350, 400 carries in a season is just going to catch up with him. And even if he doesn't get hurt, it'll impact his performance. And what does a new offensive coordinator look like in Tennessee now that his current or former offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, is now in Hotlanta with Matt Ryan and that group? So too many ifs and questions about Derrick Henry for me to invest at a top 12 rank. And for me, it really comes down to my fear of injury due to use or slowing down due to use and a lack of PPR. So that's where I'm at with him. Where are you at with DH?
Yeah, I have him a little bit lower than the consensus came in here. I have him at 9. And the reason I have him there is mainly because I think if you were looking at this and saying, where are you going to rank this guy? Oh, just out of how would you rank these running backs if you were looking at a 2-year window, which I think is about as far as you can really go with running backs. And I think it's pretty safe to say that Derrick Henry will be a top 10 running back over the next 2 years. He's a little bit older, be 27 heading into next year, but he's locked up as far as money wise, at least for the next 2 seasons, right? I think when you look at the amount of carries this guy has gotten, 681 carries over the last 2 years. He pretty much saw that 300 carry number from 2 years ago and spat in that face, but over 370, I believe, this season. And he had a career high in catches, Memphis, with 19. So like you said, there's not a lot of floor there, so he's going to need those rushing attempts. But I think as far as that offense still running through him, that's gonna stay the same. Now, he has an expiration date on him. So when you compare him to somebody like, and I'll just use this last rookie class again as an example, like a Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins. Do I think that Akers and Dobbins are going to be better than Henry over the next 2 seasons? I do not. I think Henry can still be better than them. But when you're talking about your fantasy team in 2023, Derrick Henry might not even be on that squad, and you're going to be looking at good production, still from those younger backs. So I totally get not including Derrick Henry on that. When I'm doing my running back rankings, I'm really looking at a 2-year. I really factor that in and what I think they're going to do, and of course that also goes into what you can do with that player, right? You can't necessarily sell Derrick Henry, so part of their value is got to be factored in these rankings as well, which is why I still have him inside my top 10 because I think you can do a lot for your team, but the getting out is probably right now because, like you said, these guys are not for long, and I think you have to lean youth at that running back position longer term. So a little bit lower, but he is an interesting case, but one that I just never seem to find myself with before because of all those things.
Well, we're kind of on the same page. Like, I know you're our redraft guru. You're the redraft guy. And for 2021, if you want to put DH in your roster, probably going to be a second rounder. If I had to guess today, in January of 2021, I feel like he'll be going around the 18th overall in a 12-team league, somewhere around that middle of round 2. And maybe that's a value for you as the guy who finished as I believe he was the RB 2 or 3 overall on the season in full point PPR, to his credit. Just a lot of questions about the long-term value. So that's the reason for my fade.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what you don't want to fade. That's the dudes over at VeridianGlobal.com. That is our official apparel provider. And they have a new merchant that provides goods to them. So you'll still get the same designs. They'll still look the same, but the amount of things that we can offer you will go way up. So it'll be more than just T-shirts and hoodies and hats. There'll be more in the collection. And talking to Maddie today, Maddie is the graphics guy. He does a lot of the work behind the scenes for the Dynasty WarZone as it relates to the merchandise at Veridian Global. And we're on the same page. Long sleeve T-shirts. I love a good long sleeve T-shirt. I'm going to work on designing one of these. I don't know what it's going to look like, But make sure you bookmark the page over at Viridian Global and check us out, man. Just go to Viridian Global and search Dynasty WarZone. You'll see the Air Force inspired logo. You'll see the Army inspired logo. You'll see the NWO inspired logo, and you're going to see a lot more cool stuff from the DWZ. So head over to Viridian Global. That's VERIDIAN, Viridian Global. Search Dynasty Warzone, see what you like, and then stick around, guys. There's going to be some really, really good stuff. All right, Kyle, let's get back to our top 10. And now we are into the top 5. I've actually got this guy ridiculously ranked. His name is Jonathan Taylor. You know, there might be some homer bias. I know you moved him up your rankings from when we first did these to tonight. So what are your initial and current takes on JT?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier with Swift being near the top of when I'm looking at this rookie class at 1 year in the books, and Swift is just behind Jonathan Taylor for me. I have Taylor. I moved him up to 4 in my overall dynasty rankings. The dude obviously carries a ton of youth. He's going to be on this Colts offense for the next 3 years without any issue, right? And that's a good offense you're going to be a part of. Now, the quarterback situation could be up in the air a bit, but I have faith in what this Colts team can do to bring somebody else in and continue to feature Jonathan Taylor like we saw in the second half. He was an absolute stud. He showed that he's a adequate pass catcher. He's only 36 receptions on the year, but we really saw that picking up towards the second half, which is what I think you can definitely expect going forward versus, an established veteran that only has a, 5 or 6 game sample size of him doing something different, right? When you're talking about a rookie, I think you can really weigh what a second half of what a player does a little bit more going forward. So, a really good offense paired with a really good coach. The quarterback's really the only question mark. I mean, this kid is talented. They use him at the goal line, and even if he's paired with Naheem Hines, next year or two, that doesn't scare me off, right? In today's NFL, your running back is not going to get 85-90% of the work unless apparently your name's James Robinson. But I think with JT, man, he is one of the hottest names out there. He's hard to acquire right now, and if you have him and you weathered the storm of people burying this guy in October, November, then you have one of the hottest pieces in Dynasty right now. So he's inside my top 5, and that one's I feel pretty safe about that, unlike some of these other guys that we still haven't talked about that do have maybe a few more question marks, but got to love what you saw to JT in his rookie year.
Oh, dude, JT is my guy. One of the greatest gifts I got this holiday season. One of our Patreons named Mike reached out to me and thanked me first personally, and then in the Patreon group chat, he was like, "You guys better be thanking Memphis for telling you just to relax and hang on to your JT shares, because that was the best advice. When things are going bad, it's always the worst time to make a move. If the stock market's sliding, you shouldn't be selling. You should be holding, maybe buying a little bit. And JT is just another example of that. And I've got him up at 2. We're going to talk about some other guys. There's some injury concerns. There's coming off of injury. There's age. This guy is a physical specimen, a physical freak. And nothing against Uncle Phil, because Uncle Phil did okay as the quarterback for Indy. I think he was top 10 statistically, as crazy as that is to say. But here in Indy, we have a saying: in Ballard we trust. We've got 4 all pros on this team. It's like ready to go. You got like that complete set. You're just missing the one piece. Now it happens to be the most important piece, which is the quarterback, which is why if I'm in Houston, I'm not moving to Deshaun Watson. But I believe that Ballard can pull something off. I mean, the guy's obviously a genius or a thief or both, because we got the morons in in Seattle giving up 2 firsts for a box safety with 0 interceptions. We have the Bears giving up multiple firsts and a second for Khalil Mack. We have the Rams giving up multiple firsts for Jalen Ramsey. And for some reason, Chris Ballard was able to get an all-pro defensive tackle for 1 first, for a defensive tackle. So I don't know if he has like that Jedi mind trick. We all have that guy or lady in our league. They're like, "You will give me your best player." They're like, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you just give me a first for this really good player?" And you're like, "Okay." That's what Chris Ballard does. So I firmly believe he'll improve the quarterback position. But JT, physical specimen. Up until the playoff game against the Bills, where he had 2 drops, he was like a 95% catch rate, a pass catcher on the season, more involved in the passing game than we could have ever imagined. Great offensive line. Again, everything around him. And we saw what this guy can do down the last handful of 5 or 6 weeks of the season, including the playoffs. So for me, he's number 2, an easy number 2. This next guy, he's got rankings as high as 2 and as low as 5. Comes in at number 4 overall, Dalvin Cook. Now, you see a lot of him up there in Chicago. What are your thoughts on Dalvin?
Yeah, and I apparently might be on the low end, even at 5, apparently. But for me, what you saw from Dalvin Cook, this guy does it all, right? He had over 300 carries this year, a lot of work, but he's involved in the passing game. He's a great pass catcher, and this is an offense that wants to run the ball, features Dalvin Cook at the goal line. Everything's checking all those boxes, right? He's not for the faint of heart if you ever actually watch this guy play, because the dude hobbles off like 4 or 5 times a game, right? He's like the Sammy Watkins of the running back position. So what I like about Dalvin Cook, if I own him right now, is he's coming off his best season, right? And he's putting up touchdown numbers that you can cash in right now and make it happen. And that's sometimes the easy way, to give advice, right? When he's really high, just like Member said, you don't want to sell when things are bad. When things are great, okay, yeah, just sell the guy, right? Now, do I think he has another year or 2 left in him? For sure. I got him inside my top 5. I have him ranked ahead of Derrick Henry, but I kind of view those 2 guys the same. I think there's an expiration date on Dalvin Cook, and it's you can see it now, right? It's not way down the line. It's right ahead of you. So I think Cook can still be a featured guy for the next 2 years in an offense that fits him well. But the reason I have him slightly ahead of Henry is the receiving. But that's why I have Taylor ahead of him, as I'm assuming that's you as well, since you have him at 2, is just because you're looking at a 2-year window with Dalvin Cook, and then it's probably game over. So I like the guy, but you just have to have a strong stomach to watch him on Sunday and know that at 26 years old heading into 2021 is that he's maybe got a year or 2 left, especially if they keep giving him 300 carries over the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I just have durability issues, man. I mean, he had his first, I think, shoulder injury in high school. He had several surgeries in college. He's had this collarbone reoccurring thing the last couple of years, the ACL. At some point, that's going to catch up with him, and he got paid. So, normally these guys will play hurt when they're getting paid. When we jump on your show and we do some redraft content in like July and August, of course I'm going to have him as a first-round pick because he's first-round worthy, but this is Dynasty. If I'm in a startup today and I have to choose between Dalvin Cook going into year 5 or I can choose Jonathan Taylor going into year 2, it's a no-brainer. For me, it's an absolute no-brainer. But if you're going, productive struggle in a startup, Dalvin Cook's probably not your dude. But if you're trying to compete and win the league in year 1, Dalvin Guy's a guy that you can look at. You got to kind of look at him as a 1 to 2 year asset if you're acquiring him now, knowing that you have to have a short-term usage strategy and then a quick turnaround exit strategy. So let's get to number 3. This guy will also be coming off of injuries. Speaking of ACL, Saquon Barkley. Now, I know he gets a lot of heat with you because you're a Cowboys fan. I'm actually excited to see what this offense can be in year 2 with the Clapper. Jason Garrett, I was listening to Colin Cowherd, and he was going over Jason Garrett's resume while he was in Dallas. And all these top 6 categories that he was in cumulative over his years as the offensive play caller. And I'm like, well, man, he's in New York. Doesn't look like he's going to get a head coaching job. He's going to be there. Daniel Jones is going to get Saquon back. They're probably going to draft a couple of offensive pieces. I'm actually excited for this offense. Saquon tore his ACL real early in the season. So he's had the longer recovery time. I think he hits the ground running. Again, my fear going into year 4, major knee injury. That's why me personally, I had him slightly behind Jonathan Taylor. Still love him. He's a borderline round 1 startup pick for me in a super flex because I want to get one of those top 5 or 6 QBs. I think that we're talking about how short the shelf life these guys have at the running back position and coming off of ACLs and surgeries and stuff. And you want me to forego the quarterback who I could have for 5, 6, 8, 10 years in favor of the running back I could have for 2 to 3. does not make a whole lot of sense to me. So I still like Saquon quite a bit. I think he's a very good talent. I think he's in my opinion, and I'm kind of on an island on this, my opinion, I think an offense that can be very good. Not great, maybe not elite, but I think it can be very good with a couple of tweaks. So for me, Saquon's 3. And for the group, Saquon's 3. What say you there, Mr. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm Saquon at 3 as well. And, the injury is the big question mark. I like what you said as far as, some continuity heading into year 2 for this Giants offense. I like, obviously not having Saquon, he's their best offensive player, right? So that was a huge hit for this offense as a whole. I like some of the pieces that this offense has. I'd love to see them. I know they're picking obviously really early. I believe they are they're just outside the top 10, if I'm remembering right through my draft order, because they were behind the Cowboys. But I would love to see them take a big time wide receiver and just add alpha to this receiving core. I like the pieces they have at receiver position, but I don't really think that they have, that true number 1 guy. And if you can add him to this offense, I think they could really be clicking. They play in a division that Washington has a good defense, but they play the Eagles and the Cowboys twice a year, and those two teams' defenses are questionable at best. So as far as Barkley, like you said, the dude's coming off an ACL, which you hate, but he's an absolute stud. He does everything well. He's going to be in an offense that, again, I agree with you. I think is on the upswing. And he's much younger than a lot of these other guys that we've talked about here in the top 5 besides JT. So, I'm kind of giving Barkley a pass on the injury just based off of the talent and the fact that I know he can be a 60+ catch guy on top of it. So I'm still buying with confidence. He's not in my first round as far as overall, but he is a top 3 dynasty running back for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And his cluster of rankings is very tight. He's as low as number 4 and as high as number 2. So he's really tightly bunched amongst everybody here at the DWZ. Number 2 for me, and number 2 cumulative across the board was Alvin Kamara. Do you need any more evidence of what he can do for you on a weekly basis than that Chris game where he scored 6 TDs? My fear is what happens with the quarterback change. I think it's highly unlikely that Drew Brees comes back in 2021. He is going into year 5. Now, he plays a game that is a little bit more conducive to a longer career. So out of all these quote-unquote veterans, he's still like a very young man. He's like 26 years old. So he's like much like Austin Eckler. He plays a game that will age well. I did not mind him having because I feel like he's always going to have a running mate. He's always going to have a Latavius Murray. He's always going to have someone there to take some of those dirty, grungy, grimy, between the tackles. Hey, we're up, 14 points. Let's grind it out with someone not named Alvin Kamara. So he's going to be used. My concern is the QB. Can the QB, use him as an extension of the passing game? Can the new QB line him up in the slot? And we didn't see a lot of that with Taysom Hill. Is it going to be Taysom Hill? Is it going to be famous Jameis? Is it going to be a rookie? I really don't know. So that's my one fear about Kamara. But with Kamara, at least it's not his age. It's not his usage. It's how are they going to continue to be as efficient as they have been with his usage without Drew Brees? I think it's a legitimate concern. It could be no big deal at all because Sean Payton's still the mastermind behind the scenes there in New Orleans, but that does not mean that a lot of mysteries around the very most important position in the thing. So obviously I've still got him at 2 overall. So how concerned could I actually be? But I owe you, the listener, an honest opinion on what I think about the man. Where are you at with AK?
Yeah, I have him at 2 in my rankings. You mentioned it perfect. Like he'll be 26 heading into next year, which is the same with Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, but you also referenced it. Like the guy doesn't get 300 carries. He can sit at 170, 180 and be perfectly fine, and they can have a running mate in that backfield. But the question is, he's been able to do that on limited carries because the dude's getting 80+ catches every single year, and has had a ton of touchdowns. He was down as far as in 2019 in the touchdowns, but in 2018 and 2020, 19+ touchdowns, both of those seasons. And the biggest question mark is, how does the next quarterback in New Orleans use him? If those catches drop to 70, does he still put up the same kind of production? Probably. I do think he is that efficient. But if the catches drop to around 60, 55, then we're getting worried. And now we're talking, back end of the top 12 maybe. We're talking Austin Eckler-esque, which isn't bad, but you're paying the price of, the top 5 running back. So I like Kamara a ton. I hope that whoever they bring in next, Peyton sits him down and says, hey, this is our best weapon. Make sure you get him the damn ball. Because I love watching Kamara play, and he's just so different. But that age 26 doesn't concern me as much, like you said, as some of these other guys, because he plays a different game.
Yep, absolutely. And then the name that you haven't heard yet, Christian McCaffrey. He is number 1 on everyone's board except for one. One of our rankings had him at 3rd, so it's not like it's a horribly egregious ranking of Mr. McCaffrey. And, he is kind of like the opposite of Derrick Henry. He got like that year off. He had the high ankle sprain. They treated him like fine china. They wanted to make sure that he came back and was not subject to injury. Then he tweaked a quad. And I like what the coaching staff did. They're like, we are not playing for anything. Why are we going to run out what is currently the face of our franchise and our most expensive offensive piece to just get the crap kicked out of him in meaningless games? I like that as a guy who has Christian McCaffrey on a few teams out there. I was really excited. Don't get me wrong; those teams could have used him in the playoffs and would have gave me a shot in the arm from a championship winning season. But long term, I like it. I think he's 25 as well. So he's right there. But again, we said it about Kamara. We said it about Austin Eckler. He plays a game that I believe will age well. My one slight concern, is at some point his magnificent play caller, Joe Brady, is going to take a head coaching job. He was rumored to Atlanta. He was rumored to Philadelphia. It doesn't look like he's going to get a job this cycle. But at some point in the near future, he probably will be snapped up, which will have an impact on this offense in total. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for now, he is my 101.
Yeah, same, man. And there's just no reason to fade him at this point. It was perfect as far as for dynasty value that they didn't put mileage that unnecessarily needed to be put on him at the end of this season. So it stung for 2020. I get it. The dude still flashed when he was out there. So as far as like the concerns of how will he perform in this offense with a new coaching staff, I think you can probably just put those to bed, even with a small sample size. McCaffrey is just obviously a beast, and he does everything that you need, and he sees a good amount of work. So somebody that you love to see as far as, that many receptions from your running back. And there's no reason to fade him at this point. The dude is still the RB1 after an injury-plagued 2020, but I think he's locked and loaded going forward.
All right. I don't have a sound drop of the dude from Saw that says, let's play a game. But I got this one. Look at that. It's not playing now. It's about the haters ball. But I do. Let's play a game. Let's play a game real quick. All right.
Sure.
Let's play keep, trade for, and trade away. As opposed to keep, trade, cut. I'm going to give you a list. I'm going to give you 5 or 6 names of the guys that were just barely outside our consensus top 12. And you can tell me which one you're going to keep, which one you're going to trade away, and which one you're going to cut. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. We have J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, James Robinson. You have to keep one, you have to trade for one, and trade one away.
All right, can you roll through that list one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. It was J.K. Dobbins,
mm-hmm.
Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, and James Robinson.
All right. So if I'm I'll say there's a bunch of those names I do like. If I'm keeping one, and it depends on if I feel like that maybe if you're on Twitter sometimes maybe I'm wrong here, but I do kind of get the feeling that a lot of people aren't buying into James Robinson. And I think you mentioned earlier with Gibson, like I have 0 question marks about Robinson, especially in the short term, because this team needs a lot of pieces. They found Robinson was pretty much gifted, as far as not having to invest much. And as far as from a dynasty perspective, I think if you try to get rid of him right now, I just think he has more value on your team than you're able to get back for him. So even though I wouldn't rank him the highest of those group, I think that I just wouldn't get as much for him in return. So I'm going to go ahead and keep and hang on to him. Trade 4, I would go with CEH. I think Edwards-Helaire is somebody that he was inside my top 12. He came in at number 12 for me. He still had a really solid season despite missing a couple games. 210 touches, over 1,000 total yards, just had the 5 touchdowns. I think that number goes up, and I want any piece of this Kansas City offense I can get. And as far as trade away, I would probably say Josh Jacobs. He's just a guy that I think carries a lot of value right now. He's extremely young, obviously, and coming off a great season, 12 rushing touchdowns. But he had the 3rd most attempts in the league. He barely got over 1,000 rushing yards, and he still only totaled 33 receptions, which isn't horrible. It's not Derrick Henry reception totals, but all last season we heard about how much more he was going to be involved in the passing game, and he really wasn't. So Jacobs is somebody I still really like, but I think that as of right now, you might be able to get more for him than he might carry as far as value on your roster. So I'm going to go with that.
All right. Well, I don't hate it. Well, I'm going to go through. I'll go through my version of the exact same thing. My trade for the guy I was going to trade, I was going to say Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I'm going to pivot to give the audience a different perspective. I am going to go Cam Akers. Now, I hate buying the hot it guy coming off of a great 6-week run. But I tweeted this out at DWZ Memphis. I tweeted it out on Sunday. It's like if you're into buying Cam Akers, you got to be into Jared Goff. Because Jared Goff, when Todd Gurley was at the peak of his powers, he was QB 12 and QB 6 in 2017 and 2018. In 2019, when the Gurley descent started, he dropped to QB 13. And this past year, without any Gurley or bell cow running back, he was QB 19. How do you get Jared Goff and the offense going? You get a bell cow running back going so that the play action means something again. So I'm firmly now Edwards-Helaire would have been my guy. I think he's cheaper than Cam Akers right now, and I think he's going to be the more productive guy because of his passing volume in year 2. Darrell Williams is one of the free agents for the Chiefs. As is Le'Veon. We don't know what they'll do with Damian Williams since he sat out last year. I'm sure there'll be another running back in the mix, but Andy Reid, I think there's this misnomer because of what we saw Kareem Hunt do as a rookie with Andy Reid. Well, he was forced into that because Spencer Ware got hurt. I would have loved to have said Edwards-Helaire. You stole him from me, you son of a bee. The guy that I'm trading away, and I've already traded away one share, and for me, that is J.K. Dobbins. I know people love him. I know they're going to say, oh my God, how could you be? Guys, it's all about targets to the running back position, and they don't do that. They don't do that in Baltimore. They just don't. I'm looking at it right now. J.K. Dobbins had 24 targets, 18 catches. Gus Edwards, 13 targets, 9 catches. The fullback, Patrick Richard, whatever. 9 catches on targets. They just don't overly use the running back. And you know what? He could be great in this offense, and I get it. But I just don't. I would much rather have the Akers, the Swift, the Jonathan Taylor. I would actually rather have Antonio Gibson plus some additional picks or capital coming back than J.K. Dobbins. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Gus Edwards is going to be there. I think it's always going to be a mix. And when you're fighting for goal line touches and rushing yards when you're quarterback, I do a lot of gambling props. And for the last month, the highest rushing yardage prop of any Raven has been Lamar Jackson. Do you see that changing? And so if you're not going to lead your team in rushing and you're not going to have a lot of receptions, it's just too much. But the steam's there, went to a very popular university. And so for that reason, I would be trading your man. And my hold is Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is a guy that's firmly in his top 12 list this time last year. I hate to call a Super Bowl winning a Super Bowl winning coach not very intelligent, but I do not understand. When things are bad, man, just run the ball. You know what? Carson Wentz is struggling. You can run the ball with Miles Sanders. Hey, you know what? We're going to bring in this rookie quarterback. Jalen Hurts. Hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to run the ball. Doug Peterson did not get that. So if they wind up with a good offensive mind in there that's willing to run the ball in Philadelphia, I could see Sanders' value reinflating to what it was this time last year. But because of that, because the market's kind of down on him, he has to be my hold. So there you go, man. I kind of created that on the fly, a little buy, sell, and hold, if
I like it.
you will, with the running back position. And what's wrong with SmackDown? Are you bringing in some new company, a new guy to talk some fantasy with over there?
Yeah, we're and you guys are getting a little insight here. I'm gonna have a co-host for 2021, and he was on the show just last week. So Jake Ripp's gonna be joining me as my partner in crime next year. So right after the Super Bowl, we'll be hitting the ground running in season 2, and looking forward to work with him. So Jake and I are rolling through a lot of stuff right now as far as our plans for the year and everything. But I'm looking forward to having a more permanent partner on the podcast and everything he's going to bring. So just be sure to stay tuned into the SmackDown. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up throughout the entire year because there is no off season, as you know, Memphis.
Oh no, absolutely, and don't worry, no one listens to this podcast anyway. just a few thousand friends, tuning in. But yeah, man, Kyle is doing a lot of good stuff, and we're working on some really cool stuff for you behind the scenes with Kyle, with Jake. Jake's rankings will be up as part of the staff rankings as well here at the DWZ. And we're going to be doing some really cool stuff for you. We're going to get some Sundays going this coming season. We're going to do a live YouTube show on Sundays. Now, it won't always be all of us, and it won't always be me or Kyle. It could be Jake and Jerry. It could be Maddie and the evil Dr. Kyle. You never really know what combination of hosts you could get, but we'll be here on Sundays. We'll be here talking, DFS. We'll be sitting here talking some gambling. We'll be helping answer and start sit questions. So that's why you want to tune in and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because when you need us, we'll be there and we'll help you guys rock this thing out. But man, Kyle, thank you so much for jumping on. Jerry couldn't record on a Monday, but because of your kindness and generosity, we were able to, and when I say generosity, I mean with your time, and because you're a busy man out the streets of Chicago. And but because of your kindness, we're going to be back here tomorrow night with Dallas, with Shane, with Kane and Jerry, and we're going to be looking at these running backs from the last 3 classes. Is JT going to be the 101? Who knows? You have to tune in tomorrow either via podcast or YouTube to find those answers. But on behalf of that man, his name is Kyle. You can follow along at Kyle FF Fellas, and you can follow me on Twitter at DWZ Memphis. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great week.